All right, guys. Hello and welcome to this episode of the Results Loading Podcast hosted by Prosperous AI. I'm your host, Michael Atkin, and today I'm very, very pleased to be joined by Greg Garvin, VP and Director of Global Procurement at the Gilbane Building Company. Greg started at Gilbane nearly 20 years ago as an intern, has worked his way up the ladder to his current role as a VP, and has graciously agreed to give us some insights into his role, the current state of the industry, and everything in between. So Greg, welcome. Thank you so much for joining us today.
Absolutely. It's an honor to be with you.
Yeah, likewise. So Greg, hopping right into it here, you've had quite the career at Gilbane and have really climbed the ladder, starting as an intern, as I mentioned, now operating at the VP and director level, Director of Global Purchasing to be specific. What personal and professional traits do you accredit for helping you separate yourself from the rest and allowing you to really grow and progress so quickly within Gilbane?
Yeah, it's a great question. So I think it was around 2015, I took Gallup, the famous polling company. Gallup has their Clifton Strengths Finder assessment. It's sort of like a personality test. And it really affirmed what I always sort of intuitively knew about myself and my approach to work. So it outlines like your top five strengths. It ranks all 30 some odd strengths, but in your top five, that's really your most important leading strengths. And three of my top five are learner, context, and intellection. And so I think it really just affirmed like what I intuitively knew, like how I operated in my career and my personal life. I've always had a hunger to learn new things, to think deeply about issues. That's where the intellection comes into play, and to seek to understand wherever possible. That's the context, right? And I think that's really played out in my career path. I've done almost everything that you could do for this company. I started out in field operations. I've been on construction sites as a superintendent, project manager, project engineer, scheduler, basically every role that you can fulfill in the company. And I've always had that hunger to try something new, try the next role, whether it's a lateral move or an upward move. And I think that speaks to my personality. Like I really value generalized skill sets versus specialized skill sets. I grew up on a dairy farm in New Hampshire, and when you're a farmer, you got to know how to do a little bit of everything. You're a mechanic, you're a carpenter, you're a business person, and the whole nine yards. And it was just really like a natural fit to me. And through all those experiences, I became sort of like a Swiss Army knife,
the utility guy.
Exactly. A multifaceted player. And I think that has provided a lot of value for me to Gilbane, and it's just a really natural fit. I think another thing is that I'm a very loyal person. I'm a family-oriented person. Again, speaking to my background on the farm, I grew up with a big extended family, a very conservative, sort of risk-averse type person. And both of those traits, the loyalty and the conservative risk-averseness, are pretty unique to the construction industry, but definitely not unique to Gilbane. Gilbane has core values, of course, and loyalty and integrity are two of our core values. And so people here at Gilbane, myself included, we place a lot of value in being part of a long-standing family, a part of the Gilbane family, and we take pride in that integrity and the weight, the gravitas behind the Gilbane brand, and sort of just total cultural alignment with the organization really speaks to my tenure here. So that's a quick overview of it.
Yeah, absolutely. And I want to go back real quick to something you said about the Gallup personality test. I think most people have done those before, but what you mentioned about being kind of a learner, a learn-it-all. At Microsoft, when I worked there, it was their biggest thing was you don't have to be the most educated, you don't have to be the smartest engineer ever. You just need to be able to consume as much knowledge as possible and really work your ass off. And if you can work your ass off and consume knowledge and be hungry to learn more and have that integrity that you mentioned, starting from coming from the farm and the culture that sets and the precedent that sets, going into your personality and then through your career development and your career growth, it goes a long way. It doesn't seem like it on the surface level, but you're a living, walking example of what that background can really provide. And to my point, I love talking about this stuff. Guys who start at the bottom floor as an intern. I was an intern myself as well, and now I'm, VP level. And it's a really beautiful thing, especially when you're able to see the progression in less than 2 decades at a great company such as Gilbane.
Absolutely, yeah. And the relationships that you build along the way through that loyalty to an organization is like invaluable, yeah, absolutely invaluable. So that's another important point to point out.
Well, especially with a company that values those family values and they're
Mm,
not so corporate when it's like you're just a number and you're disposable. And if we have a few bad quarters, it's like, okay, we got to wipe out the whole organization. It's like
yeah,
they
absolutely
they
not.
acknowledge the loyalty, and here you are. And they've really helped you grow and develop as into the profession that you are, right?
100%, 100%.
Yeah, Greg. So with that being said, can you give us an overview of the strategic procurement initiatives you're currently overseeing at Gilbane? We talked a little bit about this in our pre-chat on Tuesday, but how are these initiatives kind of aligning with the company's broader goals that you're overseeing?
Sure. So my role as VP Director of Global Purchasing is a brand new role at Gilbane. So it's an initiative in and of itself. And with the establishment of that role, really we're looking to strategically leverage two different aspects within our purchasing or procurement process here at Gilbane. And those would be relationships and data. So speaking to relationships, as a construction manager, Gilbane is a construction manager. Our success hinges on our trade partners, the folks that we hire to build the buildings for us. We call them trade partners in the organization, or in the industry rather. Trade contractor is sort of the well-known term. But we use trade partner because they're truly a partnership. We view that relationship as a partnership, not a series of individual contracts, right? Or individual transactions. And so first and foremost, my efforts, we're seeking to streamline our communication with these trade partners, deepen the relationships that we have with them so that we have a smooth working relationship. We want to seek out ways in which we can bring value to the partnership and ways in which they can bring value to the partnership as well, so we can ensure our mutual success, right? Mutual success is really important when we're building relationships. So that speaks a little bit to the relationship angle. And I know there's some other questions that we can get in a little bit deeper there. On the data side, that's the second point. There's tremendous opportunity to leverage data to support the relationship initiatives I talked about, but also to create efficiencies for ourselves and our partners and our clients. Frankly, of course, that's what we want to do. Data is underutilized, I think, in the construction industry. I think there's a tendency to look at every individual construction project as like its own little one-off. And historical data or any kind of data really isn't leveraged enough to enhance our operations or the operations on the ground of construction projects. So we're looking to leverage that data, capture that data, leverage that data, data like total spend with vendors, other different KPIs such as safety, financial health, that sort of thing, so that we can and gain new visibility and new data, things like sub-tier spending, right? Who our trade partners are contracting with, who are the suppliers that they're contracting with. Through that leverage data, we can create a better experience for everybody and a more powerful performing team. These initiatives speak to our Gilbane strategic plan initiatives as a whole. So we have 4 pillars of our strategic plan. 2 of those pillars are the strength of Gilbane and people first. So by leveraging our relationships, the strength that Gilbane has with our relationships and our data across our enterprise, we can really ensure that we're delivering predictable performance, profitable performance on our projects. And then the people first, right? So construction is a people-heavy business, right? It's tremendously difficult business as well. And it can take a toll on people. And if we're leveraging relationships and our data, we can streamline how we're doing business. We can create better work experience for our people and the people that work on our job sites. People can feel like they're optimally performing, right? And they're not just putting out one fire after the next, which can often happen. So those are really the high level goals of this role.
Yeah, and I'm glad you touched on data and the importance of data, because data in today's day and age is literally the new oil or the new gold in terms of the value. And like you mentioned, it's often underutilized. And would you agree or disagree with the fact that data and technology is often underutilized, especially in the space that you guys have traditionally worked in? And now finally, there's starting to become this realization. It's like, to your point earlier, billions and billions of data points that can help us with forecasting, help us with vendor management relationships, that can help us with overall costs and understanding where every single dollar is going. Where do you guys, would you agree with that in a way? And where do you guys kind of stand on that aspect?
Yeah, I absolutely would agree with that. Obviously the construction industry is a very analog, historically like a very analog industry, very hands-on, right? It never will not be a primarily hands-on business, right? We're building things with our bare hands. But, with the adaptation of technology, with the gathering of data, there are a tremendous amount of data at our fingertips that enable us to make better decisions. We're not necessarily looking to capture data for profitability purposes. Profitability is an end result of performing better, and that's really what we want to do with data gathering and data analysis. We want to perform better for all those reasons that I mentioned before. We want to be stronger, more efficient. We want our people to have a better experience. We want to make them feel like they're operating at the top level, and so that's why we want to capture that data.
Yeah, absolutely. And given your role that they created for you, and I don't know if you're going to touch on that later, but I want that to be of note eventually that the title that you now own was created specifically for Greg. Relationships are a huge part of what you're overseeing, and given you're a construction management company and it's kind of your job to make sure that all the dominoes are falling at the right time, everyone's staying in line and on schedule, if you will. What strategies have proven most effective in building and maintaining those partnerships? And like, how are you really ensuring that you're forging those strong relationships with the trade contractors that you were mentioning earlier?
Yeah, I mean, there's so much that goes into relationship building. First and foremost, like I'm 2 weeks in, right? So I'm still in sort of the getting my head in the right space, gathering data on the relationships that we have, doing relationship mapping. That's what I'm spending a lot of my time on. I'm building out sort of a CRM of sorts to track relationship history and development of new relationships that we have with our trade partners. It's important for me to be methodical, right? I don't want to go off running in a bunch of different directions. I want to be very methodical about how we build these relationships. I think it's really important right out of the gates. One of my important goals is to make sure that there's mutual clarity in these relationships, right? We want our key trade partners to have visibility into our organization, right? Our structure, our C-suites, our core markets, our geographic organization, and we want the same from them. We want to know where we stand as organizations, the markets that we're strong in. We want to know each other's strong suits. We also want to focus a lot on executive to executive relationships, right? I'm not going to be the only relationship that our trade partners have. I want our executive suite to have relationships with their executive suite so our organizations can zipper up. That's the terminology we use, zipper up. It's really important to me as I go into this that this relationship is not transactional, right? I really want to truly know our trade partners, and I want them to know me on a personal level. Speaking back to the beginning of the conversation, my character, I wear myself on my sleeve. That's just always how I've always been. I like to be open, vulnerable. I like to be my authentic self, and I want to encourage my relationships on the other side of the table to be the same. We have a culture of that at Gilbane. I spoke to it a bit before. We are literally a big family, literally and figuratively, and we want to bring our trade partners into that family. So like when both of us can bring our whole selves to the table in the relationship, we can build better buildings, we can have fun doing it, we can get to know each other. That's really like the tenets of relationship building as far as I'm concerned.
Yeah, in a stressful situation when you're overseeing and having to deal with so many different things. I mean, I was talking to a project manager yesterday who was overseeing a huge project here in Denver after the pandemic in 2022, when there was the supply chain market pretty much in terms of commodities when it was in absolute turmoil. And I was asking him, how are you managing your stress and how are you getting through day by day, weathering that hurricane? And he's like, you know what? It's the relationship I had with my partners and my vendors and my trade partners, to your point, and how we had set those relationships up years prior is what allowed us to be able to do this. Every day the price of glass was changing, fluctuating by anywhere from 10 to 30%. Lead times are 24 to 36 months. And it's like, it's not just a one-man job. And so to your point, I was actually about to ask you how you ensure that your trade partners are aligned with Gilbane's core values and business objectives. It seems like the answer is having people like you in place to make sure everyone stays happy, to ensure that everyone's on the same page in terms of values, and that, you kind of keep everybody in line and ensure that, we're striving towards one goal, one team, one vision kind of thing, I would imagine, correct?
Yeah, yeah. Value alignment takes time to flush out, right? And we have both a methodical, objective approach to value alignment with our trade partners, and a subjective approach, right? And maybe I'll speak a little bit to that. So, first out of the gate, and maybe it's a little bit callous, but we evaluate our trade partners by our pre-qualification process, right? So we pre-qualify all of our trade contractors using a third-party platform. They submit information on their financial health, their safety performance, project portfolio, bonding capacity, the whole 9 yards. Important step, totally important step, but it's
Due
only
diligence.
it's only an on-paper approach, right? So it only goes so far. It's only those objective upfront details. A lot is revealed during the bid solicitation process. So, speaking specifically to the procurement process, right? When we send out a RFP, we go through that bid solicitation process, that proposal evaluation, communication styles, attention to detail on both sides, our side of the table, their side of the table. That's an important leading indicator of how this relationship is going to go, how healthy this relationship is. But the rubber definitely meets the road in the performance of the work, right? Okay, somebody has been awarded an opportunity. Now they're going to execute a construction project for us. As I said before, people heavy business, relationship heavy business, lots of problems, right? Construction project is just a series of problem solving. We're constantly faced with new challenges, and how we navigate those challenges with our trade partners, and inevitably differing opinions, differing perspectives, how we navigate that together. That's the true testament to value alignment and the health of the relationship, right? And so we subjectively feel that as we go through that experience with our trade contractors and trade partners, but we also objectively gather data on that as well. So we do trade partner evaluations, we aggregate that data, so we have indicators of health of the relationship across the board.
And you talked a lot about problem solving. It's obviously a huge part of the industry you're in, and that's obviously no secret. What happens if one of the trade partners that you go and perform all this due diligence on, they look good on paper, their financials are okay, insurance is all in check, performance records, everything is okay, and then you start a project, like you said, rubber on the ground, a few weeks go by, and all of a sudden it's like, these guys aren't getting anything done. The lead times that they put forward in terms of the components and materials required for that specific project or part of the job is 4, 6, 8 weeks behind schedule. It's costing you guys money every day. Do you have backups in place? How are you managing those, what seem like small problems, which eventually turn into, massive hurricanes that ends up on your desk? How are you dealing with that kind of stuff on the day-to-day? Because obviously, given the current market conditions, I would imagine it's a prominent part of troubleshooting that ends up being your problem.
Sure. Yeah. That's a loaded question. Yes, things come up every day. Challenges come up every day. Sometimes those challenges are avoidable. Sometimes they're unavoidable. There's various contractual mechanisms, which again are callous and would prefer not to ever address if we ever have to. What I would like to speak most on is like the relationship aspect of those problems, and how do we deal with those problems at the relationship level, not the contractual level, right? So obviously the intent of my
which is better for the relationship. Sorry to interrupt.
100%.
Like,
we don't want to pull legal triggers. We want to pull relationship triggers to resolve problems, right?
Exactly. You want to call the guy on his cell phone and be like, "Hey, man, like, what are we doing here? How can we figure this out?" Not having your lawyer send them an email or a letter, and it's like, you know what?
Absolutely.
Now we're really going down the drain here, right?
We want to solve the problem as a team, and that again speaks to the intent of the role, ensuring that we have strong relationships, so that when issues come up, because they will come up, they always come up. We all have bad days, and we all have issues that are preventable or unpreventable. When those issues come up, we have the right executive zippering, so that our executives can talk to their executives and resolve the problem as efficiently as possible, and try to avoid all the contractual paper throwing, because that never ends well.
At all costs.
Yeah.
And that's a Gilbane core value, it seems like. It doesn't seem like they want to do that's just the way that you guys have operated. I know Gilbane's been around for more than a century, correct? That's just the way we want it to be. That's just a value that they're instilling in people like yourself. It sounds, you wear yourself on your sleeve. You come from the background you described earlier. It seems like you fit really well in with that culture, and that's a lot of what you're dealing with on the day-to-day, essentially, correct?
Correct. Yeah. No. And in addition to the loyalty and integrity, we have teamwork and caring. Those are also important core values for us. So again, we try to leverage those first. Tough-mindedness is also a core value. There are instances where you do need to be tough-minded, but we like to pull those other levers first, like I talked about.
Definitely. And one more question about the relationships with trade partners. How, especially at the global level, I know you're doing global procurement as well. How are you ensuring, or do you even have any involvement in helping them withstand market fluctuations and economic challenges? Like I was talking about 2022 a few minutes ago and how the commodities market was just shot completely in turmoil. How are you helping them manage those situations with maybe supply chain or employment issues, stuff like that? I know COVID was pretty unprecedented, but how is Gilbane, given you're a construction management company, helping them overcome those economic situations that are obviously difficult to maneuver and to manage?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I think first and foremost is making sure that you have an open dialogue with each other so that you know each other's strengths and weaknesses, right? Speaking to market fluctuations, we're going through plenty right now. Specifically private markets, developer-driven markets are quite slow because the cost of money is quite high. And so we need to know which of our trade partners rely heavily on that market. And if they do, they're quite hungry right now. So how can we leverage them and help them fill those voids, right? So we want to know, what markets they might be overstretched in, what markets they have a need to fill. We might want to know what markets, industry markets or what geographic markets they are looking to expand in so that we can help them if we're strong in those areas. Again, it's just a mutual sharing of strengths and weaknesses. If we have that clarity, then we can help each other through those tough times.
Absolutely, Greg. So I want to switch gears a little bit. You have the word global in your title, global director of global procurement. What elements or to what level are you working on the global scale? Are you working with vendors and trade contractors in Asia and Europe and South America as well? Or tell us a little bit about the extent of the global element to your job currently.
Yeah, so the global aspect of Gilbane, I would say, is a budding aspect of Gilbane. So we really went global when we acquired a company that did a tremendous amount of federal work on military bases across the globe. And so the global aspect for now is primarily within the federal work, although we are doing projects in Germany and we have done food service projects in Ireland as an example. For now, it's bulk, by and large, North America, in the greater North America, North American continent, rather. We do a tremendous amount of work in Mexico. We work for Constellation Brands, which is a brewer of Modelo beer, my favorite.
Oh, yeah.
But to answer your question, regardless of where the work is, whether it's domestically here in the United States, there's always global suppliers involved, like Siemens. Siemens is a major global supplier, of course. We have lots of structural steel that comes out of Canada, as an example, and other parts of the globe. So it's really important to have an understanding of the global landscape, regardless of where you're performing the work. And we certainly are expanding into the global market, but like I said, primarily right now through federal work.
And primarily, obviously you don't go from just the US to the entire globe. You go from the US to North America, then maybe into Europe, Asia, et cetera, right?
Correct.
And the reason
correct. And we want to follow the right clients. We're not looking to take over the globe. We're looking to grow slowly, right? Crawl before we walk, with the right clients, the right opportunities.
Yeah, you hate to spray and pray and just go full throttle blindly into the global market when, like you said, you got to crawl before you walk and, get nailed by regulations you didn't even know existed, for example, or what have you. I'm sure obviously Gilbane knows, but it's a great point in terms of like scaling at the appropriate pace. That's something that we deal with all the time in our company. And it's like one of the worst things you can do is scale too quickly, you start over promising, you start under delivering, and it hurts the reputation, the brand, everything like that. As you know, and so, yeah, the reason I ask is because global adds a whole new element to business dealings in general. The regulations for procurement in Canada are different than the procurement regulations in China, obviously. The list goes on. So curious about your involvement with that, because it is a whole different animal, and it's something that needs to be understood thoroughly. Otherwise, like I said, it can cripple your business.
Yeah, I think, first and foremost, we want to build with confidence, right? So we want to perform where we know we can perform. We don't want to take big chunks of that elephant, right? And we want to build through relationships, right? We want to partner to build buildings. We don't want to land in a geography, gobble up a bunch of the local labor that we have no relationships with. We don't have an understanding of regulations. Like I said, build with confidence, build with established relationships. That's really our approach.
And Greg, can you speak a little bit more to that? Gilbane is a 100-some-year-old company. It's several $billion in revenue per year. Is it like just good business? What is the idea behind like scaling so slowly at the global level with given the size of a company you already are? It's not like you guys are like a 10-year-old company. You're doing a few $100 million a year in revenue. Like you guys are a big player. I mean, I'd say top 10, top 12, I believe. What is the idea behind, on top of what you've already discussed? I'd just like for you to kind of open that can of worms a little bit more and dive a little bit deeper into Gilbane carefully crawling before walking at
Yeah,
that
I
global
think.
scale.
Yeah. I guess I would say that it's a cultural thing first and foremost. So we are a 150-year-old company. We were established here in Providence, where I sit, and we did grow slowly. And we grew slowly, I would say, organically from the ground up. So we would follow a client to a new geography, hire locally, build a business unit locally, build a large business presence locally, follow a client to a new geographic location, so on and so forth. And we do that. It's important that our business operates at the local level because it fits our culture, which is family first, right? We want our people to live and work in the same community, right? There are other construction companies who are travel players, and they do that really well. And they send folks out for a job for 2 years, and then they move them across the country for another job for 2 years, and they bounce all over the country. And that's great. No slight against that, but it has to be a cultural fit. That's not our culture. We want our folks to go home at the end of the day with their families. And so that means slow organic growth from the ground up. And that's always been our approach. And I see it continuing to be the case.
Well, 150 years in business, apparently that those values are working pretty well for you.
Sure. Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, Greg. So I want to kind of switch gears again here and a little bit more of your personal career and overcoming adversity, dealing with challenges, especially at the desk that you sit currently. During your career development, and it could be recently, it could be last week, or it could be 15 years ago. Can you share a time where nothing was going your way, or when you faced extreme adversity or were responsible for like a major issue? Not uncommon in the construction industry, as we've discussed, and how you managed to mend the situation, maybe learn something from it and grew from it. I know it's cliche to say always failed and learn from it or what have you, but can you share a specific example that comes to mind?
Yeah, sure. Maybe not a specific example because they happen, like I said, every day. Every day we're faced
Sure.
with adversity, and I've certainly made plenty of mistakes, and I probably will again. I think maybe speaking towards what do I do when that happens, right? I've always found that when I've been in a bind, it's important to revert to first principles, right? Like, what do I know to be true at its core? Because I think it's important to remain clear-eyed about the issue itself, to be objective about the issue. Try not to let those feelings of, oh man, I just screwed up. How do I dig out of this hole as fast as possible to keep my skin intact, right? Like, be clear-eyed about the problem. Be objective. What happened? What do I need to do? Think all the way around the issue, right? That gets back to the intellection. Like, I've always been sort of a slow thinker, like trying not to think with my emotions, slowly thinking. Always had an eye for second and third order effects. Like, okay, I'm in a bind. I need to make a decision. What are the consequences of my decision? What are the consequences of my decision, right? Second and third order effects. That's always just helped me. Slow thinking. I've always tried to let go of my ego. Again, I wear myself on my sleeve. Be open, honest, vulnerable. I screwed up. Here's what happened. Own up to your mistakes. And again, speaking to relationships, like bring in the relationships, consult people. How can I solve this problem with the help of others? Because you don't always have to solve your own problem. You should seek consultation from people you know and trust. And yeah, it is cliche, but making mistakes is part of life. You have to learn from those. And the more input you can receive, the slower you can approach that problem, the better. At least that's what's always worked for me.
Yeah, absolutely. And I want to talk a little bit more about the mentorship element that you were just mentioning. But real quick, I want to touch on slowing down your thinking. And I think especially with a lot of people in the workforce who are in my generation, people are so quick to react and make an unadvised or a non-advisable decision quickly, as slap a band-aid on a problem or situation that usually just ends up throwing gasoline on the fire, if you will.
Mhm.
Something personally, and I'm in my late 20s, almost 30s now, and I've made mistakes. I'm thinking of a few I've made in the corporate professional world myself right now, and I was quick to react and quick to send a message or shoot an email, trying to throw water on the fire, and
Mhm.
it ended up just being gasoline. And so it's a
Yeah.
great point. It really resonated with me specifically, and I'm sure to the listeners who listen to this as well. Slowing down, like, okay, there's a problem. Okay, what happened? What do we know? And how can we manage to figure out a way to fix this? Whether it's to be reaching out to resources for help, you know how to fix it, but it's going to take some time or what have you, as opposed to that instant reaction, which I think, like I've mentioned a couple times, makes things a lot worse. And I think I see that more and more, especially in the kids these days. So I'm glad you brought that up.
Yeah, but first principles, second, third order effects, right? Like if you think about it like that, I think that helps you slow down. The other thing I would say, I've had people tell me in my life, never try to solve a problem at the end of the day. Always try to solve a problem at the beginning of the day. Because you're at the end of the day, you're like, oh my God, my life is ending, right? I just got to solve this issue before I go home. I won't be able to sleep at night. It's actually the opposite. Like I'm always foggy brain at the end of the day. I'll think the world is ending, right? There's terrible issues on my plate. But then I wake up the next morning, I have a clear vision of what I need to accomplish. It doesn't seem like as big of an issue, right? I can tackle something objectively and clear-eyed. So yeah, never try to solve a problem at the end of the day, always at the beginning of the day.
Yeah, you didn't send the panicked email. You're not going to bed angry at your wife. It's a much
Yep.
better situation for you the next morning than it is at 6 p.m. on a Thursday.
Yeah. Let it marinate a little bit, because you'll always feel better in the morning.
Absolutely. And real quick, I wanted to kind of use that to piggyback what you just mentioned into mentorship and how you've utilized mentorship. Obviously, we've touched on your career growth a few times today. What role has mentorship played in allowing you to grow and progress and have these insights and ultimately wisdom? Like I said, you're sitting at the desk that you're sitting at now for a reason. What role has mentorship played in terms of assisting you get to where you are now?
Yeah, mentorship is huge. The great thing about the construction industry is when you're placed on a project team to build a project, you know for certain that that team is going to be different on your next job. There might be one or two carryovers that stay together, but you're going to build a new family every time you build a new project, right? You'll have a different project manager or a different superintendent. And so through that, through my career, I've developed, tremendous relationships. People, again, the culture at Gilbane, or people stay at Gilbane. They have long tenures.
For a
And,
reason, yeah.
and so each project's like a mini family. And I have a father figure, a mother figure, depending on how the case may be. And I've always relied on those people throughout my career to weigh in. Everybody has their own strengths, different perspectives on life. So whenever I felt like I was in a bind, I have huge wide net of family members that I can lean on and guide me through the process. Um, you know, I've always found those sort of casual, familial type mentorships to be the strongest mentorships, as opposed to like the formal top down, you shall pick a mentor, you shall meet every other week. Like that never works. It has to be organic. So my current boss, Steve Duvel, was my boss as a way back as a project manager in 2008. We were on a big Keystone project together. We had a large project team. There was 20 some odd of us, a 2-3 year long project. We ate lunch every day together. Stop work, sit at a table, eat lunch. Don't talk about work. You got harassed till the day was done if you talked about work at lunch, and that was super important. Like we just got to know each other so well, got to know each other's personal lives. And Steve pushed this culture, like you have to bring your whole self to work. You have to be vulnerable at work. You got to let your workmates know what's going on at home, because that's important context, right? We can't work well as a team together unless we know what each other's bringing to the table, and we try to support each other as much as possible. And again, that's just baked into the Gilbane culture. So a tremendous amount of mentorship happens organically. And like I said, I think that's the most important.
Yeah, man, Gilbane, the culture, they've got it figured out. Seriously. I mean, it sounds like people are doing 20, 30, 40 years there for a reason. There's no need to leave. it's as good as it gets over there, right? And
Easily. Yep.
it's so simple. It's like, just have lunch and don't talk about work for like 45 minutes or an hour. It seems so simple, but like long term and during the tumultuous days, which there are for
Mm-hmm.
everybody,
Mm-hmm.
it's really helpful. It's really helpful. Like, don't bring work home. Like, bring home to work a little bit. Make sure your coworkers know what's going on, like who you are, and because you're spending a lot of time together. My best days in the career field have been with an excellent manager and an excellent team around you. It doesn't even feel like you're at work most of the time because of that culture that Gilbane has made very clear that this is what we do and this is how we treat each other, and it makes a big difference for your happiness, which is obviously really important.
Yeah, I mean, I think it speaks to the family-owned aspect of Gilbane. I mean, we are a privately held, family-owned company. I think we're in our fifth or sixth generation at this
Wow.
point. There's 100 and some odd family stockholders of the company, and that culture just presses all the way down. Like, it's the company name first. It's not profit and data first. It's people first, and so that sinks through all the cracks within the organization.
Fantastic. No, absolutely, Greg. And last question here. Looking ahead, what are your long-term goals for Gilbane's procurement operations, and how do you see the industry evolving in the next few years?
Sure. Yeah, I think long-term goals for Gilbane, speaking in the procurement space specifically, we're always looking for consistency across the organization. Because of how we grew, there were some inconsistencies, so we're always pressing down consistency to try to have a consistent experience for our people, a consistent experience, of course, for our clients, and a consistent experience for our trade partners, right? We want the Gilbane experience to be like a McDonald's hamburger. I think efficiency, we are continuous improvers, again, baked into the culture. Like, we're always looking to make what we do easier, more effective, not only because it helps profits, because it does help profits, but again, primarily because it helps our people. Like, we want our people to feel like they're high performing, satisfied, they have good work-life balance. We don't want people to have headaches and just feel like they have rocks in their backpack, right? That sort of speaks to just in general the tone of like long-term strategy for procurement here: consistency and effectiveness. The industry as a whole, and it is kind of related to sort of the last part I said about work-life balance. My personal hope is that the industry as a whole works towards reducing the drag in the procurement process. So the construction procurement industry is still very 2D heavy. Right? Designers, engineers, they're creating drawings and plans that are PDF form, right? And that's how they get sent out with a bid solicitation to all of our vendors. And all of those vendors need to do quantity takeoffs, right? How many square feet of X is there of the building, so that I can put my unit pricing on that. And that is one aspect of their bid, the objective aspect. And there are plenty of reasons why it's hard to make that automatic and well-known, but we should be making it automatic and well-known. Like, there are objective aspects to this bid that should be made known as easily and as automatically as possible to reduce all that drag, right? Each bidder I send a bid out to needs to do a takeoff, right? And that's 2 weeks worth of effort in some cases. So I would love for the industry as a whole to move towards a process where that period is shortened, if not eliminated, so that our vendors can focus on the more subjective things, which frankly have a bigger risk profile than the objective things. Things like, what is the schedule for this project? What are the safety concerns associated with my scope of work that I'm bidding on? What are the logistics associated with this project? How do I need to think about productivity and sequencing of my work? Those aren't reflected in the drawings. Those are subjective things that really they need to be focusing on, not doing their quantity takeoffs. So if I were to have a hope for long term, it's like, let's tackle efficiency there. Let's address efficiency in the objective details of a solicitation and shine the light on the subjective stuff so that we can address risk.
Absolutely. No, and it makes perfect sense. And I think ultimately a lot of those efficiency drivers and productivity drivers will come through technology and the emerging technologies that, are becoming more and more accessible today. I obviously, can't not mention AI and how that's helping. There's construction centric AI tools now. The world is moving at a million miles a minute in terms of like identifying those problems for every industry and figuring out ways to drive that efficiency that you're hoping that we see, hopefully sooner rather than later, of course.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
So Greg, hey, thank you so much. This was an absolutely fantastic conversation. Really enjoyed our time together. Do you have anything else that you want to mention before we wrap up here today?
No, I really appreciate the opportunity. I love doing podcasts. I've done a few about procurement and about the construction industry. So it's just an enjoyable conversation and the opportunity to chew on the subject with you. So I really appreciate it. That's all I have to say. Thank you so much.
No, absolutely. Love these conversations. And as you mentioned, chewing on the subject, getting some expert opinions from people such as yourself. Congratulations on the new role. I wish you the best of luck and just happy to hear that companies like Gilbane exist and those core values are so meaningful to their people and drive for results that you guys are seeing. It's a really, really great thing because not everyone's as privy to that kind of culture as it seems like Gilbane is. So really great stuff. And thanks so much again for being on.
Thank you. I appreciate it.